Emma. And what I totally agree with your recent agreement is it reminds me of a fact that about 4 or 5 years ago, I was invited to be a panelist at the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And then the responsibility is throwing at the media. So media is responsible. And then what I have to answer very honestly is, even though media is responsible and we know, but to what extent media is educated is a question. So we are now, at that time I would say, we are in the very, very infancy stage in terms of media. So what I would like to now present is the current media scene in Myanmar. Uh, as you know, Myanmar is sandwiched between China to the east and India to the west. But there are not many people who knows much about Myanmar, what is happening in media. When I first joined the current media, it's called Myanmar Times. The weekly journal, most likely we are the only journal about 14 years ago, and then we were allowed to run in English for the first time. At that time, there were not many, and I'm not sure, only 2 or 3 at the time. So at that time, none of us in the newsroom, except the expectorates, have the experience or the proper training to do this job. So we are like trying and then trying and learning, things like that. So about 5 or 6 years later, the weekly journals in Myanmar developed. And in 2012, that was under the press censorship by the Ministry of Information. And in 2012, August, the government relaxed the censorship. So once the censorship is freed, like many people, many media houses, many journalists are writing whatever they like. They are not aware of the responsibilities they have. At that time, I remember the opposition party's leader picture was very rarely seen. So many were running the lady's picture. Now, what is more popular is the previous military leader's picture is more popular, but it cannot be seen in the. So it's something like this. So now we have 400 monthly, weekly, or daily newspaper. And of that, about 12 is daily newspapers. But running a daily newspaper is now having a loss, even though they have their backup weekly journals. Weekly journals are making money, but as a daily, they are losing a lot of money. And at the same time, they have to compete with the much subsidized government newspaper. So of the total print run of about 600,000, the government papers constitute about half. And they are claiming that they are making profits, while from the private sector, it is very difficult to make a profit. So it is a double challenge for the private sector publications. They have to compete with the government, as well as they have to compete with each other. So in the private sector, even though there are, I would say, mainly 3, those who are doing the media houses, purely for journalism and purely for the masses. And then there is another category. They are run by the ex-generals and ex-ministers. And then the third category is run by the politician. So they have the different interests. So I would say the media in Myanmar is very tight. And now we have about, as I just mentioned, 400 dailies, 400 monthly and weeklies, and total number of media people is about 4,400. But the point is, one of the press council member told me that maybe less than 10% have this basic knowledge about the do's and don'ts. So it means that about 90% of the journalists don't have the basic knowledge about the ethics and laws, things like that. So I would say the media sector in Myanmar, especially the print media, is still very young. But what is the role played by the press council is encouraging. Because of the young and inexperienced journalists, there were numerous issues with the sources, especially with the government. So the government side is reluctant to access information to the private media, and the private media cannot run the stories accurately. So to narrow the gap, the press council at the moment is doing their job to make that gap narrower. So what is encouraging at the moment is that the press council representing the media people in Myanmar, they are meeting with the president. Actually, president received them. President received and have a meeting and discuss in detail about this, the current situation. And also the legislature, also judiciary. And then the latest development is the military chief received the press council member last week. At first, the press council member were surprised that it was just meeting for the sake of meeting. But in reality, the military chief was very interested to meet with the press council members, and he told me that it was more than 3.5 hours. So what agreement they got is that even though the press council's primary mission is to get the freedom of press, both sides realized that it is the capacity building that is required on the media side. And at the same time, the government side is required to give information to the private media. So I think this is a good trend that is going on in the media scene in Myanmar. And then with the increase in the number of private media, and the competition is very tight, what is another encouraging thing is that the revenue spent on the advertisement is increased. In 2001, according to a market survey research team, $11 million was spent. That was about 14 years ago. But they are estimating that this year the advertisers will spend 200 million this year. So it is, I would say, quite encouraging for the media people to survive. But at the same time, the media people as well as the media owner needs to improve a lot. So the latest development in Myanmar media scene is that the three sovereign power, the legislature, the judiciary, the executive people met with the press council and then press people. So I think in a few years' time, the four pillars will be improving their role each. And I think the media, the fourth pillar in Myanmar, should be the main pillar, and that needs to improve a lot and in a very swift, speedier way. So I think it will happen in a few years' time. This is the print media. About the broadcast media, we are in the stage of just entertainment and not much about the information thing, because we still don't have the broadcast media coming out. So let me conclude that the media scene in Myanmar will improve together with the three other main pillars, that is judiciary, legislature, and the executive powers. And then they are knowing that media is important and the media should not be excluded. Media should get involved more and more. Thank you.